Subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon to never miss any update from Rouse IAS Study Circle. Join the only official Telegram channel of Rouse IAS Study Circle to get the relevant materials and important updates. Hello and welcome to the Daily News Simplified, the what, why and how of the newspaper analysis. So today we are going to discuss The Hindu Daily Edition dated 22nd October 21. The news to be discussed has been displayed on the screen and timestamping has been provided in the description section. So in continuation with the series of taking the prelims question 2021, here is another question from the polity section of set A, question number 86. Which one of the following in Indian polity is an essential feature that indicates that it is federal in character? The options are A, the independence of judiciary is safeguarded. B, the union legislature has elected representatives from the constituent units. C, the union cabinet can have elected representatives from regional parties. And D, the fundamental rights are enforceable by courts of law. So if you have gone through the research work of Rouse IAS, the DNS of 3rd June 2021 clearly answers this question. The session talked about the aspects of Indian federalism, among which the 4 aspects were given. The first was the written constitution, the second was the rigid constitution, the third was the division of powers, and the fourth one was the independent judiciary. So from this session we learned that independent judiciary is one of the key aspects of Indian federalism. And in continuation with this, the Focus magazine of July 2021 further elaborated on this aspect, and it again mentioned the independent judiciary as one of the natures of federalism in Indian context. Moving on to our first topic, crossing the 1 billion mark. Now this 1 billion mark is in reference to the COVID-19 vaccines administered by government to Indian citizens. The government data and the news reports suggest that India has crossed a 100 crore COVID-19 vaccine doses few days back, and the Prime Minister has congratulated the healthcare workers for this milestone. And this is also acknowledged at international level too. And the important thing is that it mentions that India crosses the 100 crore COVID-19 vaccine doses in about just 9 months. This topic directly falls under the General Studies paper 2 under the part of the governance and the micro section of the government policies and interventions for the development in various sectors and issues arising out of their design and implementation. Now under this topic we will learn that what are the multidimensional significances of this milestone, how we have achieved this success, and we will also analyze the complexities of this Herculean task with this schematic. Further, we will look into the future trajectory which India can take, and in the end, we will come to the practice questions which you have to think about. So first of all, we will analyze this chart. The chart shows the days taken for the total COVID-19 vaccination doses in India to cross every 100 million dose mark. Now, if you see that in the beginning, to cross the first 100 million mark, it took around 85 days. And the last 100 million mark was crossed in just 19 days. Therefore, it mentions that it took 19 days for the total doses to cross 1 billion from 900 million. And it is also quite impressive that only 11 days were taken to reach 800 mark from the 700 mark. So the point is that continuously the days to administer 100 million persons have decreased. This shows the increasing efficiency and productivity of all the stakeholders which were involved in this whole drive. Now we will understand this topic as a case study because this can be used by you in your real examination, and this case study can be quoted in several topics in several GS papers. So we will analyze this topic as our case study. Now this case study helps us to understand some of the key aspects of policy formulations. How a wholehearted multi-stakeholder approach involving doctors, scientists, political leaders, administrators, etc. can bring a change and make a largest democracy to deliver. In the words of Honorable Prime Minister Mr. Narendra Modi, these all stakeholders has been referred to as Team India. And what is this Team India? Scientists, enterprises, doctors, social workers, youth, religious leaders, administrators, and the community at large. The credit goes to each and everyone who was involved in this ecosystem. Now we will look at what are the multidimensional significance of this milestone. The first is that it has got huge internal recognition. Many civil society organizations, NGOs, newspapers, magazines have recognized the government efforts, and along with this there is an international recognition also. The WHO and UNICEF has hailed this vaccine milestone as a tremendous achievement. So both internally as well as internationally, this milestone has received a huge recognition. The second significance is in relation to the Universal Adult Vaccination Program. Now you all are well aware about the universal vaccination programs which Government of India undertakes with respect to the children. However, the point is that unlike the established universal immunization program for infants and children, India has never undertaken any massive universal adult vaccination program before this. So this has paved the way ahead for a country like ours to go for adult vaccination programs also. Now the third important significance is that this milestone has been achieved in times when the supply chains were purely disrupted. But still, to achieve the vaccination targets, uninterrupted supply chains were strengthened. Now in order to understand the complexities of the supply chains, that how much Herculean task was it, we will analyze the journey of one container, the one vial of the vaccine. As we all know that initially the laboratories were located in Pune and Hyderabad only. Now just the one vial of vaccine was transferred from Pune or Hyderabad lab to the state hub and then to the district hub and then to the vaccination centers. Now just imagine to reach all the vaccination centers of all the districts in India of all the states, and that too in a time bound manner. This was not at all easy. Combined with this simple physical transportation, there was a real-time central monitoring of the temperature range, because one vial of vaccine requires a specific temperature range so as to get the exact results. So this temperature has to be maintained in this entire journey, and for this a real-time central monitoring network was established. And to achieve this, lakhs of cold chains were there. The state governments cooperated with the center, which becomes an important example of cooperative federalism also. The states were given advance notice of the delivery schedule of the vaccines so that they could plan their drives better and the vaccines reached them on the pre-decided days. This has been an unprecedented effort in the history of independent India. And all these efforts were supported by robust technological platforms to ensure transparency as well as accountability. So that is why uninterrupted supply chains in those times when there was a lockdown, when the public transportation was not there and the people were locked up in their homes, requires some respect. The next important significance is that it has proven the worth of Indian scientists and doctors. It has made India Atmanirbhar, that is self-sufficient in terms of vaccines. And those vaccines were made in India. So during the times when the whole world was battling to develop their own vaccines and still majority of the countries do not have their own vaccines, India has proved its mettle in terms of vaccine manufacturing, development, their transportation and administration. The next significance is that this whole drive has pointed out one important aspect, that is the change in attitudes. Because as we all know, initially people were not ready, they were not accepting the vaccines and they had certain second thoughts in their mind whether to administer vaccine or not. But with the continuous awareness programs, government was able to change the attitudes of its community. Now this is very important, because if under one program or under one policy government is able to change the attitudes of its citizens, now this can be replicated to attain the goals of other schemes also. For example, Swachh Bharat Abhiyan also needs change in attitudes. So for this, continuous awareness and sensitization program is required. Moving with the another important point, we have witnessed that this whole drive was largely equitable in nature. Everyone, whether he or she was a VVIP person or a common person, everyone was administered these COVID vaccines under a strict schedule. Everyone had to undergo the standard operating procedures. So the VVIP or the VIP culture was not witnessed largely across the states under this drive. And the last important thing is the importance of proactive approach. In early 2020, when the COVID-19 was rampaging across the world, it was clear that this pandemic will have to be eventually fought with the help of vaccines. India started preparing early. Expert groups were constituted which started preparing a roadmap right from the April 2020. So this proactive approach is required in other areas also. Now, again I am repeating that why we are dealing this topic as a case study, because it will help you in multiple questions as well as papers. We'll discuss this how. To understand this, we will do a reverse engineering in this topic. For example, this particular case study. For example, you just think about this particular case study and think that in how many areas or in how many papers or subtopics you can use this. For example, this can be used in GS paper 2 under the part of policy interventions. This can be used in the ethics paper under the part of persuasions and motivation. This can be used as an example of the role of awareness and sensitization programs. This can also be used in general studies paper 3, the role of R&D, the importance of self-sufficiency, the social role of logistics, and the importance of digital infrastructure to attain our social goals. So that is why we have taken this important news article as a matter of analysis in the context of case studies. But still all is not done. These two important steps should also be taken care of. It is suggested that Government of India should increase the pace of the second dosage, because presently around 30% of the population have received second dosage only, whereas the 70% of the population have received the first dosage. So this gap needs to be minimized. And the second important thing is that the production supply should be ramped up to not just meet the domestic demand but also the international demand, especially in the low income or middle income countries. Now, if you have understood this topic well, we'll come to a practice question. Now read this question carefully, understand its context and the real demand which it is expecting out of you. Despite many hits and misses in COVID management, achieving the milestone of 100 crore vaccine doses in a country like India is worth appreciation. Discuss this statement and bring out the key learnings which India can integrate in its universal immunization program. Now the important key dimensions of this question is the hits and misses in the COVID management, the appreciation for this milestone, the key learnings out of this whole drive and how it can help India to achieve the universal immunization programs. Now summing up this entire topic once again. We looked into the context of this news and then we analyzed that exactly where this topic will fall under the UPSC syllabus. Then in detail we analyze all the multidimensional significance of this case study which can be used by you in your various papers. With this we analyze the inherent complexities involved in transportation of these vaccines across the country, across all the states, across all the centers, backed by robust technological platform to ensure transparency, accountability and real-time central monitoring. Then from this we witness that in which areas, in which papers you can use these case studies, in ethics, in GS3, in GS2, etc. And finally we looked at what should be a way ahead for India now onwards. Now we will move on to our next topic which has appeared in today's newspaper. It says that India needs a strategic reserve of coal and gas. So if you understand, the basic theme of this topic is related to energy security which India needs. But the immediate context of this news is that recently India is witnessing a huge and severe coal shortage. Now this topic falls under the General Studies paper 3 under the section of economic development and the micro section of infrastructure, that is related to energy. Now, if you want to understand that why is it so that India recently is facing a severe coal shortage and how much India is dependent on coal for its energy supply, you can refer to the DNS supplement of week 1 October 2021 from the Rouse IAS playlist. The topic says that why is coal shortage choking thermal power plants? Now the theme of energy security is very important for the Indian perspective because as we all know that the demand in India is continuously rising and we are facing the shortage of energy. Plus majority of our energy sources are the conventional non-renewable sources of energy. So that is why in the UPSC examination also this theme is very much important. For example, this theme was asked in UPSC 2018 in mains examination in the context of nuclear energy. The question asked that with the growing energy needs, should India keep on expanding its nuclear energy program? Discuss the facts and fears associated with the nuclear energy. So in similar fashion, there can be a question on the coal-based thermal power plants or the coal-based energy. Coming back to our topic, which says that India needs strategic reserves for the coal and gas. First, we need to understand that what exactly are these strategic reserves. As the definition says, a strategic reserve of anything is the reserve of a commodity or item that is held back from normal and is used by the government or any organizations for that matter as a strategy to cope up with unexpected events. So that means, for example, we know that we are highly dependent on the coal imports from the foreign countries. Now, if there is supply scale disruption in case of war or in case of certain bilateral tensions, the exporting countries might stop their export of coal to our country. So in that situation, we need to have a certain backup. To cope up with such unexpected events, we need to have certain strategic reserves which we can use in case of such scenarios. So for that purposes, the strategic reserves are generally built by various countries. For example, in India, a strategic petroleum reserve has been built. Now, according to the agreement on the International Energy Agency, each IEA country has an obligation to hold emergency oil stocks equivalent to at least 90 days of net oil imports, which means that even in unexpected and extreme situation, if any country is not getting the oil imports for continuously 90 days, that country should have adequate petroleum reserve as an emergency oil stocks so as to run its economy. For example, in India, the existing strategic petroleum reserves are in the states of Andhra Pradesh, one in Karnataka, and the other one is also in Karnataka. The cities are Visakhapatnam in Andhra Pradesh, Mangalore and Padur in Karnataka. And the upcoming crude oil storage capacities are in Chandikhol, that is Odisha, and again Padur in Karnataka. So as you can here say, the basic objective of these strategic petroleum reserves is to ensure the energy security of the country by serving as a cushion during any external supply disruptions. So this is the region whereby India holds its strategic petroleum reserves. Now we get some basic insights of the IEA, that is International Energy Agency, which is relevant from the prelims as well as the mains point of view. So it is a Paris-based autonomous intergovernmental organization. Each and every word is important. That is Paris-based, autonomous and intergovernmental organization, and this was established in the framework of OECD, Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. So the historical angle of this organization is that it was born in 1973 to 74 oil crisis. What happened was the industrialized countries found that they were not adequately equipped to deal with the oil embargo imposed by major producers, that is the West Asian countries mainly, that pushed the prices to historically high levels. So the developed nations thought that in such a scenario, when there are certain supply scale disruptions or the prices rise to extraordinary high levels, they should have certain cushion to cope up with such scenarios. So that is why IEA was established. And as you can see here, the official website of the IEA states its aim as shaping a secure and sustainable energy future for all. And that is why the broader mandate of the IEA includes energy security and energy policy cooperation. And this framework was anchored in the IEA treaty called the Agreement on International Energy Program. Now, these formal names of the treaties are very important. Agreement on an International Energy Program, which says that in case of a severe oil supply disruptions, IEA members may decide to release these stocks to the market as a part of collective action. So that is why experts have presented their opinion that we should not restrict ourselves to only the strategic petroleum reserves, but we should carry forward this policy of having a strategic reserves of coal as well as oil. Let us discuss its reasons. The first is very obvious, that it is to ensure the uninterrupted supply and ensure the energy security of our country. The second is to protect the strategic interest so that no one can take the undue advantage of India's weakness. Now, this point we discussed in the hypothetical situation which we imagine. For example, there are certain bilateral tensions with the specific country which exports its coal to us. Now, in that case, there is a possibility that that respective country will stop its supply of coal to our country and then can take the undue advantage of the India's weakness. So, in order to protect our own strategic interest, we should have the strategic reserves. The third reason is to save the unnecessary expenses. Because we all know that whenever there is a supply scale disruptions, the prices of the commodities inflate. And these inflated prices of coal will challenge the India's fiscal capacity. So in order to balance our fiscal interest and to avoid the unnecessary expenses, we should have a certain stock of coal, petroleum, gas, etc. with ourselves. The fourth reason is that this practice is gaining significance across the world. Many countries have started keeping strategic reserves because when it comes to a crunch, every country will meet its needs first. And as we all know that protecting the national interest is the first principle of any country's foreign policy. And the last reason is that we all know that there will be a rise in demand due to increase in industrialization and urbanization. And in the backdrop, we know that because coal accounts for more than 70% of India's power generation, it becomes imperative for India's policymakers to establish the required strategic reserves of coal as well as gas. So summing the entire topic in brief once again, we discussed the relevancy of this theme with the help of the UPSC 2018 question which was asked in the context of nuclear energy program. Then we looked the previous DNS session which have the details of all the dimensions of the coal shortage which India is presently facing. Coming to the main topic, we discussed that what exactly do we mean by strategic reserves, what does IEA says about those strategic reserves, and then we got some brief insights about the IEA as a body and its historical context, including its present mandate. With the help of a diagram, we analyzed the present cities as well as the potential sites of the strategic petroleum reserves, and in the end we discussed that why is it necessary for India to have the strategic reserves of coal and gas. Moving on to our next topic, that is system to track prisoners on parole. Under this topic, we will discuss the concept of e-prisons. So the context of this news is that recently Union Home Ministry has advised the states to update the recent photographs of the prisoners released on the parole, furlough, premature release in the e-prisons and the interoperable criminal justice system, that is ICJS. This has been advised to generate immediate alerts and facilitate easy tracking in the events of their violating the law. Now from this context, two important key terms emerge. One is the e-prisons and the other is the interoperable criminal justice system. We will understand both of these things in this topic. So this topic falls under the General Studies paper 2 under the subsection of the governance and the microsection of the important aspects of the governance, e-governance, transparency and accountability and institutional and other measures. So let us start a detailed discussion about this topic. This e-prisons project comes under the Ministry of Home Affairs and this aims at computerization of the functioning of the prisons in the country, including the digitization and availability of prisoners' data in an electronic platform, which will be accessible to the designated authorities of the central as well as the state governments. Now, in order to understand this topic, first you need to understand that what are the key aspects of our criminal justice system. The first and the foremost thing is the police stations, whereby primarily the FIRs are lodged. Then comes the convicts, then comes the judiciary, then are the jails. So this forms the integrated criminal justice system, and the e-prison project aims to address all of these important components which are there in the criminal justice system of our country. So that is why the basic idea of the e-prisons project is to create a centralized standard information database. And further, this data has been integrated with the police, the court system under the interoperable criminal justice system. Now there are three important components of e-prison. The first is the e-prisons management information system. So as the name suggests that this is dedicated to ensure effective management of the prisons, and that is why it focuses on day-to-day regular activities which go on in the prisons. The second important component is the National Prisons Information Portal. Now this will be a citizen-centric portal that displays the statistical data from the country's numerous prisons. So basically this integrates the vast network of the prisons which exist in our country. Moreover, the visitors can use this portal to schedule their visits, and this portal can also be utilized to address the grievances of the inmates. The third important component is the Kara Bazaar. Now this is the electronic portal for showing and selling the things which are made by convicts in the jails. As you might be knowing that the convicts in the jails are required to provide their labor. In the jail they make several products. Now to ensure their better marketing and their selling potential, this platform has been created. Now if you see this schematic closely, these are the users of the e-prisons suite. The first and the foremost is the police, the second is the court, third is the public, fourth are the inmates, next is the prison administration and the prison hospital. So basically these are the prime stakeholders of the e-prisons suite. And if you look at this closely, you will see that e-prison has broadly two dimensions. First is the public module, and the other is the prison staff and administrative module. So this is for the public and this is for the administrative purposes. For example, under the public module, we have National Prisons Information Portal, where one can submit his or her visit request. There will be a dashboard and statistics, inmate tracking and lookout search. Then there is Kara Bazaar. So all these are the various subsystems of this e-prison suite, and this gives us a signal that this is a holistic ecosystem being developed by the Ministry of Home Affairs. Now we will see that what exactly is meant by interoperable criminal justice system. Now by this interoperable word, you should understand that this system is basically aiming to enhance the interoperability among the different stakeholders, departments of the criminal justice system. For example, it is to integrate the crime and the criminal tracking network system, that is CCTNS project, with the e-courts, e-prison database, as well as with the other pillars of the criminal justice system such as forensics, prosecution and juvenile homes. Therefore, it is a common platform for information exchange and analytics of all the pillars of the criminal justice, and the CCTNS is a mission mode project under National E-Governance Plan. Now this factual information is very much relevant from your prelims point of view, and this provides citizen-centric police services through a web portal. It also establishes the state and national database of the crime and criminal records. Further, it aims at computerization of the police process and interlinks various police stations, state, national data centers through a data network. However, as we know that every coin has two sides, similarly, this whole project also has certain merits as well as certain demerits. So first we will look at the benefits of the ePrison, ICGS and CCTNS. The first is that it provides a national database of the convicts to track their prison records from the stage of trial. The second is it is an example of proactive policing, because by sharing the active information, lookout alerts, SMS or email with the police and other agencies will facilitate continuous tracking of the criminals, and therefore it helps to track such convicts who are released on parole, furlough or premature release. It will also help to track such prisoners if they further violate any law involved in criminal activities or violates the rules of premature release. Similarly, the photographs of the convicts will help to alert the whole ecosystem in case any inmate absconds or escapes from the police or judicial custody. And all these systems make the monitoring of the under trials as well as other people easily. And as we have discussed that the interlinking of the police station through CCTNS and ICGS will further improve the data availability for e-prison records, which as we have discussed will ensure better day-to-day prison management, ease of access to the citizens and support to the courts through its e-custody and other information systems for speedy justice delivery. However, there are certain disadvantages and challenges also. The first is that sharing of prisoner records with the law enforcement agencies is a tedious process. Second, there are chances of misutilization of data which may lead to indefinite surveillance of the convict even after his release, because now the data will be with the government and the government can keep a track of all those people who are released, and this might be misused to solve the political purposes also. And that is why several experts have opined that this has the potential to violate the right to privacy, which was declared as a fundamental right by Supreme Court under KS Puttaswamy judgment. And all these activities have a potential to increase the state-sponsored surveillance and profiling of all the convicts under trials or the people out on bail, parole, etc. So summing up this entire topic once again in brief manner, the ePrison projects is the project of Ministry of Home Affairs which aims to computerize and interlink all the important aspects of the integrated criminal justice ecosystem of our country, and that is why it aims to have a centralized standard information database. The important components of the ePrison are the prison management information, the prisons information portal and the Karabazaars. All these were the important stakeholders which have been integrated under the ePrisons project, which touches virtually each and every aspect of the prisons, whether it is related to the public or it is related to the administrative. And then we had a look that what do we mean by interoperable criminal justice system, and finally we looked at the benefits and certain disadvantages and challenges associated with the idea of this project. So the next topic is important from the prelims point of view. It is a small topic and a factual topic related to bilateral military exercises. So here we are going to talk about the bilateral military exercise between India and UK. It comes under the mentioned prelims syllabus, the current events of the national and international importance. The context of this news is that United Kingdom's Carrier Strike Group gets ready for one of the biggest joint exercises, which is named as Konkan Shakti. This name is very important, with the Indian Armed Forces. So the key facts related to the Konkan Shakti are as follow. The first is that it is the Indian naval exercise, not the Army or Air Force. Indian Navy would take the major role. Next important thing is the cultural angle in this exercise. The HMS Queen Elizabeth has an added task. It aims to strengthen military as well as cultural ties and want to work together with India to keep peace and maritime stability. The location of the exercise is off the coast of Mumbai in the Arabian Sea, and the exercise would test anti-submarine procedures where an Indian submarine would pretend to be the enemy and the Indian and the Royal Navy ships would try to find it. So such type of situations are regularly practiced in India's military ecosystem so as to keep each and every soldier on toes and strengthen their operational capabilities so that they can handle the situation whenever necessary. And these bilateral exercises are done in order to enhance the interoperability between the military of different countries. So the Konkan Shakti is a bilateral military exercise between India and UK. So now taking up the references. Today's newspaper has an editorial engaging the Taliban. In this editorial, the editor talks about the future course of action which India's foreign policy is taking with regard to the Taliban. It says that India and regional powers should ensure that the Afghan rulers respect their people's right. Actually, what has happened is that India's participation in a meeting of 10 nations with Taliban officials in Moscow and signing of a joint statement that recognized the new reality in Afghanistan has signaled a decisive shift in the country's approach towards the Islamist group. Because earlier, India had taken a strong position against any kind of engagement with the Taliban. However, in recent times, that stand seems to be diluted, and for the first time, India met a top Taliban delegation which included their Deputy Prime Minister Abdul Salam Hanafi. Now all the dimensions of this change in the shift was covered in the DNS of 22nd July 2021. Here you can see the heading that why it is necessary to engage with Taliban. So you can refer to the DNS of 22nd July 2021 in order to have a comprehensive outlook of this topic. The link to this video is also been provided in description box. That DNS also talks about the important stakes which India has in Afghanistan. For example, multiple infrastructure projects where India is involved in the provinces of Herat, Zaranj, Kandahar, Mazar-e-Sharif, Kabul, Jalalabad, etc. So please refer to these DNS to understand the topic comprehensively. And next important article in today's newspaper is squaring off again in the Himalayan heights. Now this topic has come in regard to the possibility of escalating tensions between India and China in the Ladakh area. Now we have covered this topic in much detail in the earlier DNSs. For example, the DNS of 16 September 2021 talks about engagement and disengagement of the Indian and the Chinese soldiers along the Ladakhi borders. It also talks about the China's grand strategy. Similarly, the DNS of 17th May 2021 talks about the disengagement with China after the Galwan clash. And the same DNS talks about the disengagement strategy, whereby it says that both China and India agreed on a 5-point course of action to disengage and reduce the tensions. Those 5 points were to refrain making the differences as the disputes, continuing the dialogue and quickly disengage from the borders, abiding by the existing India-China border protocols, leveraging the special representative mechanism on the India-China boundary question, and further confidence building measures to maintain and enhance the speed and tranquility in the border areas. So please go back to these DNS sessions of which link has been provided in the description box. Now is the time for the question of the day. The question asked in yesterday's DNS was the term Shadowpad, Red Eco and Ghost Rider sometimes mentioned in the news are related to cyber attacks. So the correct answer is B. And question of the day from today's DNS is recent defense exercise Konkan Shakti was conducted between India and A. United States, B. Russia, C. United Kingdom, D. Vietnam.